I'm wondering is, the U.S. economy is so strong, particularly the U.S. dollar. How can the Chinese Communist Party possibly replace those things?
Well, that's, nothing is done by accident. It's planned. So the economy is planned. The Olympics are planned. Now, what does China hope to get out of the Olympics? What did they get out of the 2008 Olympics, the Summer Olympics?
Yeah. They got a lot out of that.
Yes, they did.
Yes, they did. What's China going to introduce in the coming games in February? They're going to introduce the digital yuan. Got the whole world coming.
Yeah.
So there's two things are going to be given to the world in February. Probably the latest dose of COVID and the digital yuan. So China wants to lead the world, and they are. We're going to introduce the first national digital currency. And it's going to facilitate trade much better, much quicker, much cheaper in terms of currencies, exchanges, and all those types of things. And it also provides obviously a lot more control. They want to make the Chinese yuan compatible or competitive and preferred over the US dollar, of course. And that's one way of doing it.
Can they make it more powerful and more appealing than Dogecoin?
I have to ask myself, I'm sure you have as well, what's the end game, if there is one, for digital currency? And digital currency, the original appeal was non-inflationary, freedom and anonymity, right? So people could bargain and trade as they wish without having to worry about exchange rates and fluctuation rates and currency controls, capital controls, inflationary issues from central banks and so forth. So you had anonymity, you had speed, you had all these different advantages that just made it so, drug dealers, the dark web, those people like that stuff, but like those advantages. But the reality is that, it threatens national sovereignty around the world. And so I don't see a world that a group of nations that are going to let parallel currencies exist in the long term. I know that's kind of a pessimistic view, but I think you either control your currency or you don't. And if you can't control your currency because people are using these other options and you can't tax it, you can't trace it, you can't stop it, you can't levy against it, and it's driving the value and desirability of your currency downward, then there's a lot of problems there. So what do you as a country, if you're China, if you're the US, if you're Russia, if you're especially the authoritarian nations, what are you going to do? You're going to create.
You're going to ban it.
You're going to try to ban it, yeah,
and create your own version.
You're going to create that you control, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, I've always believed that it's important to have a stable currency, and by stable, I mean a currency where the government gradually and arbitrarily sucks value out of that currency, so people lose more and more of their capital. And that's what China's going to do with its digital RMB. Is exactly that, right? They have an easy mechanism to adjust the value of the money that everyone else holds, and they call that stability.
It sounds like inflation.
No, Chris, it's stability.
It's also a tremendous asset addition to the social credit policy. Us having this conversation would have our digital dollar accounts frozen, right? Or our digital yuan accounts, I suppose. So, sorry, you can't buy anything because we just heard what you talked about. And so your digital currency, which is the only currency that's available, let's say in sometime in the future, then you're fined automatically. No court. You just lose some of your digital yuan, some of your digital currency. So,
in some ways, it reminds me of how impossible it is to appeal to YouTube whenever they demonetize us or age restrict us.
Thank you, YouTube.
And so if China controls the global currency and it doesn't matter where you are, if they control the money, they control you.
They literally demonetize you.
Yeah.
Yes.
New meaning to that.
I always think, China's been buying and creating a lot of gold for the past couple of decades. Maybe there's this partial gold standard, right? Use the digital yuan, we have some gold.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they can claim they're going to be on a gold standard, but the problem with the gold standard, if any country that follows the gold standard is now beholden to the amount of gold that they have in reserve, unless they're cheating, which perhaps many countries did in the past, and perhaps that's one reason why we're no longer on the gold standard, because it's too hard to maintain that. But like, if people accept a fiat currency, I mean, why would China even want that? If they just would want the gold so that they can have leverage over other countries.
Yeah, it would be a national policy. It wouldn't be at the personal level. It would be, all right, we're going to adopt the yuan, and there will be certain gold window privileges for national, it may be digital dollar, digital yuan, digital ruble, and there are certain gold IMF structured or the Chinese equivalent structured ways of having gold windows be created, accommodated, so forth. But yeah, for the average Joe and Jane, no, it has nothing to do with gold. No, it has to do with power. So yeah, I don't see this digital currency being the wave of the future for so much longer in terms of the anonymity, in terms of the freedom, in terms of the lack of control. So I see it much more along the lines of, hey, adopt the digital yuan. You're going to get better pricing, better service. Your teeth will be whiter. I mean,
Well, I mean, it sounds so convenient.
It does. Well, we're already there, right? How many people go to Starbucks and just flash their phone and that's it?
Anyone who goes to Starbucks deserves whatever they get coming to them.
I can't argue that.
Yeah. Well, so I think in this conversation, we're kind of talking a lot about big picture things. And the big gap, I think, is that individual Americans don't really realize how invested they are personally in China. So how much exposure does just your average American have to China? How does it affect them?
It's really hard to put a percentage on it, but you can say, well, tremendous amounts of fraudulence in the stock market or leverage or connectivity to fraudulent companies in the stock market. So your 401k, your IRA, your investment account, and you own mutual funds, and some of those funds are international funds, and they're going to own what they think are relatively good companies, but behind those companies are other fraudulent companies, or the numbers aren't real, or they can be cratered if they wish to be by China. So that it's a weak link kind of thing, right? It's kind of like Django, right? They pull out. You think that's a real piece, but it's not there anymore. It's the numbers are fake. So on the stock market, that's a big deal. In terms of our manufacturing base, that's another big deal, right? We are dependent upon China for all kinds of things, for all kinds of products and services that actually fuel the economy. And and they still want to capture more market share in terms of capital equipment for large businesses, small and medium-sized enterprises, and they want to capture financial products and so forth. Financial services, accounting, and I know it sounds weird, but they do want to do that because they see, look, it's just picture the Amazon, for example. Amazon does all these stuff, and they're really linked to China heavily. Now picture the American economy, the small businesses, which create 70% of the jobs, and they're reliant on equipment from China. So any disruption there, it's a problem. Supply chains, we're seeing that now. And the more they lock down COVID, the more that happens. And that's not the only reason, but it's a big one.
Do you think COVID has changed anything as far as America's exposure to risk from the Chinese economy?
Our perception or reality, are you asking?
Both, but I'm curious about the reality of the situation.
It's an interesting phenomena that you have supply chains disrupted, and yet the onus is not. We're not creating all these small business funding opportunities. We're people. Larger businesses are benefiting from COVID payouts and so forth, but small businesses are not. So, is that accidental? Is that incidental? It just seems rather kind of like it's the trend of countries that power is being centralized. That's how I look at it. And one of the ways to centralize power is to make people dependent. Well, how do you make them dependent? You take away their means of livelihood. Now, obviously, you have to have industry and supplies and so forth, but it seems to have inordinately affected the small business owner. So I think that COVID has provided a method or an excuse or a reason or rationale to kind of hollow out to a certain extent the small business community in America. So we'll see what kind of recovery we have, but we're certainly less healthy than we were 2 years ago.
Well, maybe in the future, a really centralized American corporation and government can work with the centralized authorities of Beijing to create just kind of a global centralized government, one world government.
Yeah.
Why are you giving me that look, Shelley?
Do you want to get this demonetized and age restricted by YouTube? That feels like that's what you're doing right now.
No, I think he's just imagine. I think that I was hearing the piano play and John Lennon singing. We're all a brotherhood of man. That's kind of where it's going, right?
So great. He himself described that as basically the Communist Manifesto, the song Imagine. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm sure it'll be equally as wonderful as he describes it.
Yeah.
I had the impression he was kind of surprised how schlocky, of the kind of schlocky use of it all the time. That he didn't really like it.
It's amazing how people don't listen to the lyrics. Like, imagine no religion. Okay. What does that mean? Am I going to be forced to give up my beliefs?
Yeah.
Come on. No possessions. Where are my possessions going? Come on.
Right. And yet it's an anthem of kind of it could be an anthem for the CCP, really, right? It could be an anthem for kind of the far left in this country, or any country for that matter, I guess. It has a strange hypnotic power over some people, I'm afraid.